Hi and welcome to the Homeopathy Health Show. I'm Atiq Ahmed Bhatti, a fourth generation homeopath with over 25 years of professional experience and practice in this field of healing. The Homeopathy Health Show is the online voice of homeopathy around the world, promoting and raising awareness of this truly unique system of healing, which is suitable for all ages, young and old. Every week I invite guests from the world of homeopathy to come and share their experiences, their work, offer insights, and essentially talk all things homeopathy. Why not visit www.liketreatslike.co.uk and click on the radio and podcast button to listen to the latest episodes. So let's begin today's show here on UK Health Radio, the world's #1 talk health radio. Hi and welcome to another episode of the Homeopathy Health Show here on the UK Health Radio Network. I do hope you're well, and of course hope and pray it remains that way. Now I have the very good fortune to welcome John Morgan to today's episode of the show. John is a well-known figure in the world of homeopathy, and in particular his name is linked directly to Helios Pharmacy, which he founded, incidentally, in 1986. Now in its 38th year, Helios is known worldwide for its commitment to producing high-quality homeopathic remedies from source material and the development of new remedies by supporting new provings. And of course, Helios is leading the way as far as LM potencies are concerned. And trust me, we're going to talk all about potencies and source material and remedies galore. So without further ado, John Morgan, absolute delight. I'm so honored, honestly speaking, to welcome you to the Homeopathy Health Show. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm sorry it took so long to track me down.
It's absolutely fine. You know, at one point I thought I need to visit Helios and actually ask where you are at the back.
Yes. Oh, well, you're welcome to visit anytime. Yeah.
Firstly, John, congratulations for your recent fellowship from the Faculty of Homeopathy.
Thank you.
You are also a fellow of the Society of Homeopaths, so it's really nice, personally speaking, it's nice for me to know that your work and service to humanity through homeopathy, you know, is recognized, and you have done so much so far in your career. I think, and you're going to talk about that today.
Mm.
So yeah,
congratulations. Yeah, it's been nice to be involved in both associations within homeopathy in the UK, and yeah, it was a very big surprise to receive the honour. But I was very grateful.
It's well deserved. You are, as I call it, a living legend and a celebrity in the world of homeopathy. So a fellowship is like an Oscar.
Yes,
but worth much more.
Okay. Well, the reason that I can be part of the faculty is because I still am, but I originally started out as a pharmacist, as a regular pharmacist. I enjoyed very much learning pharmacy. I was fascinated by chemistry and biology and the way that drugs interacted with the human system. I found that fascinating. And I was very interested in botany, which I did as a student. And when I was studying pharmacy, there was a lot of drugs that were used that were still from plant sources, even ones we know in homeopathy, like Nux vomica and belladonna and opium and squilla. And these were common. And digitalis, I remember there was digitalis leaf tablets, which was a good heart remedy that was used in conventional medicine. So I studied pharmacognosy, and that my interest to plant drugs, and compounding. When I studied pharmacy, we were still making, or being taught to make things, mixtures, ointments, creams, suppositories. It was a very hands-on, following a recipe, and I loved that. So when I got into working in hospitals and working into retail, there was still real pharmacy going on behind the scenes, and which I liked. So while I was working in regular pharmacy, I was interested in philosophy and the meaning of life, and doing a lot of searching. I was particularly interested in Eastern philosophies and things that were life-enhancing, things that would help people be free, to help people live their life to the full, and to to have a really wonderful lifestyle. And I found that working with regular medicine, I saw how that suppressed people, how it inhibited their life, and how it, rather than free them, it actually made them more dependent and in some sort of prison. So I became very disillusioned with regular pharmacy, and the overdrugging that was then in the 70s was as it is now, but the drugs were much cruder. And so some of the consequences I saw from overdrugging were quite severe. And it was also at a time when all the azepam drugs were being given out so frequently, which are now controlled because they are so addictive and difficult to get off. So all that made me think, I've taken the wrong course. Pharmacy isn't for me. So I went traveling. I took a year off and traveled to India and did the hippie trail, and that's when I first came across homeopathy. Started reading when I was in India, and I was particularly interested in Gandhi's philosophy, and so I started to look at the alternative medicines. And when I came back, I thought, well, I love plant drugs, so I'll do a course in herbalism. So I did a herbal course for a year, which I really enjoyed, but there was something I was looking for within the philosophy of healing, of health and disease, and herbalism at that time didn't have that. And so I looked further and eventually came back to homeopathy. And it was actually the philosophy that grabbed me more than anything. I started reading bits of Hahnemann and bits of the philosophy in the books that I was picking up. This idea of a vital force, of a vital spirit that keeps everything together. And I think anybody who's really in touch with themselves can feel that sense of there is this inner intelligence and this force which knows how to heal, that keeps us in balance. And if we allow it to manifest and we develop it, we really, really can be who we are and live life to the full. And that really excited me. And then the more I read, the more this dynamic between health and disease and how true it was, how it reflects as our own experience. The Herring's law, for example, we can see that when we get a cold, we can see it working beautifully. So all the Organon and all those wonderful philosophy books, they show the truth of how life plays within our body and our mind and our emotions. And I still find that really inspiring today. So that led me more to homeopathy. And the only way as a pharmacist I could earn a living and move into that world was to actually go and work for other places. So I worked for two pharmacies that already did homeopathy. One was Gould's in North London, which was a lovely pharmacy. And then eventually my dream job was working for Nelson's in Duke Street, which
Wonderful.
At that time was the Queen's pharmacy. And I just loved it. I was completely immersed in homeopathy. They gave me a Borica. They said there's 30 remedies out there on the counter. Learn them all and counter prescribe. It was a little bit without training, I have to admit, but I just adored it and read more and more and more. And eventually the desire to wish the people back in the office and sit down with them and to go into their case and really get to grips with the chronic side of their treatment became stronger. And that's when I decided, well, okay, I'll be a homeopath. And one of the first colleges around was 2 years in. So I enrolled at the London College of Homeopathy
Right.
In 81. And it was a big college. They were taking 100 students per year. And it was at Imperial College University in London. So in the tea break, there was hundreds of students milling about, and it was a very exciting time for homeopathy. It was really the growth and the resurgence of a whole new movement, not only in the UK, but it was happening at the same time in America and some of the other countries. And while I was a student, studying hard and enjoying the new wave of George Vitulcas coming into homeopathy, which revolutionized it, there were students who had heard that I was a pharmacist, and they said, well, we want to see what it's like to make remedies. So they asked me whether I'd show them. So we used to have some little workshops in students' houses where we would pass the mortar and pestle around and grind things up and do the dilution, just for the experience of seeing what it was like to make a remedy. And occasionally, without really being very experienced, we would get some proving symptoms, which were quite interesting. But the science of provings wasn't really on our radar much in those days until later when Jeremy Sher opened the door to that. But we had a great time, and so we used to take the remedies to share amongst the fellow students. And the principal of the college, who was a very entrepreneurial and creative man, Robert Davison, he used to encourage us to be creative. So we used to sell these remedies in the break. And then just with the proceeds, we would get more tubes and get more materials and more alcohol to make more. But it wasn't really with any commercial idea. It was just to make remedies by homeopaths for homeopaths, which was a strap line that we had for many years and still to a degree have. And so when I finished college in 84, I think it was, I had about 30 remedies. And when I left college, I needed a place to practice, but people were still asking me whether they could have some. So I needed a place to live, and my wife and I, we found a small shop with a flat above, registered it as a pharmacy in 86, started off with those few remedies, and then with students and other people who were involved in homeopathy in the area around the Tunbridge Wells area, we started Helios, and it just grew and hasn't stopped since. And that was 38 years ago. So we were making remedies constantly every day, and still are for years and years and years. But the ideal, there was two things that was very important. One was that when I worked for the other companies, with no disrespect to them at all, but they wouldn't let people go and show them around. They wouldn't let them see what they were doing for various reasons. And I felt that it was important that people knew how remedies were made and could see exactly what the process was. So that's when I started doing some teaching and going to the colleges. And as the colleges developed, I think I had 20 years when I was constantly teaching, going to all the colleges, showing students how to make remedies, and also inviting people to come and have a look around at Helios if they wanted to. So I felt it was important to have that openness. And the other thing that was important is that there's not many things that you can buy where you don't know what you're getting, but you have to really trust with remedies. You just get the little white pills or whatever form. And so again, it's important that people have confidence in the tools that they're working with as homeopaths. So to get starting material and to recreate the whole bank of potencies from scratch, right through to the very high potencies, was the initial idea, and that still is our main focus. If we can get the original material and run it up right to the high levels, and now we've got high potency machines, so we fulfill that mission and continue to do so where possible.
I think what I really like about what you're saying is the transparency. It's so important, because it's actually very motivational for students or those interested in homeopathy, that look, this is exactly what the process is. There's nothing hidden. Like you quite aptly said, when you buy something, a mobile phone or electronic equipment, for example, you just trust it because it's a certain brand. But it would be nice sometimes to really know what's behind it, where exactly are the components put together. It's fine making mention of countries, but really what's the nitty-gritty? What is it at grassroots? And I think it's really important. And actually, following on from this, I was going to ask you, can you give us an example of a remedy and what the process is from source material and how that works at Helios?
Yeah. Yes, I can. I mean, the other thing is that we wanted to be as traditional as possible and follow Hahnemann's method as much as possible. So this is also what we do. So that's just why most of what the process is by hand. I mean, we have a few machines for labeling and the high potencies, but basically there's two simple processes, and it relates to the solubility of the material. Plants are generally made into mother tinctures because they have water and alcohol soluble components. So that's using alcohol to extract the essence, the medicinally active materials. it's already a potentizing process. It's already a refining process, taking the essential core from and separating it from the gross, the subtle from the gross. So there's an alchemy there right from the beginning in the mother tincture. And of course, it is a dilution in a way, so it is a potency. And then the process continues by dilution and succussion using high alcohol all the way through. For the insoluble things, the metals and the insoluble minerals like calc-carb, ferrum phos, silica, then you have to do the trituration. That's grinding in a mortar and pestle using lactose as the diluent. And that takes an hour just to do 1C. And Hahnemann developed this method, including the measurements of what quantities to take, which are very important. He took the smallest part that you could physically weigh on a beam balance, one that just works by gravity, 0.06 of a gram, 60 milligrams, and then you dilute that with it comes to 5.96 grams of lactose, and you grind bit by bit by adding it gradually. It takes an hour to do a 1C, and then you repeat that until you get to the 3C. Now, at that stage, the insoluble things have been ground down so finely, and the whole of the lactose contains the potentized energetics of the process. It can then be put into liquid to make the 4C, which is used in a 50-50 alcohol solution, and then you can carry on through the dilution process. So it means anything, literally anything, can be potentized by using those two methods, by either some sort of solution with water, alcohol, or a mixture of the two, or grinding in lactose. Well, when we made diamond for Jeremy's proving, obviously diamond's pretty hard, so what do we do there? So he managed to get some 10 micron dust, diamond dust, very pure, and so we just ground that as normal, and that gave an amazing remedy for the proving.
Wow.
Diamond can be because it mixes together, and these shearing forces create the dynamism that is the potency within the lactose.
That's really inspiring, actually. And I must mention here, recently you did a webinar. It was for the Faculty of Homeopathy in the UK, and you were actually showing us through a very wonderful setup as far as cameras are concerned on how to prepare LM potencies. I found it fascinating because it's fine watching videos, but when you see it in real time, in real life, John Morgan is actually doing it right now. It has a totally different it's a totally different experience. It's not a video, it's not recorded, it's not orchestrated. It was done as it was. So do take us through that, actually, for those who haven't weren't able, of course, to watch or tune in. But that was quite a fascinating thing, because preparing LM potencies are quite different, aren't they, to the standard remedies that homeopaths know?
I mean, I learned so much about potency with the LMs, but there's a bit of a backstory to that, in that when we were studying the organon, and even today, most students will maybe read the first couple of hundred, but at the back, the 240 and onwards, it's all about remedy preparation. And the 5th edition of the organon is all about how to make centesimals using the 1 in 100 dilution. And generally, Hahnemann's method was using 1 drop of this high alcohol from tube to tube. But in the 6th edition, which wasn't published till after Hahnemann died, there was a new method because he was trying to get a bigger dilution than 1 in 100. And he didn't have the advantage that we have now, these super duper micro pipettes that can measure tiny, tiny volumes. So he used a small little granule, the famous poppy seed granule, as a carrier. And he worked out that if they were of a certain size, 1 drop of alcohol would wet at least 500 of them. So one of those granules would contain a 500th of a drop. So the LM method is simply similar to the centesimal, except instead of going 1 drop to 99 drops, you're doing a 500th of a drop into 100 drops. And that gives you this big 1 in 50,000 dilution. And then the final thing is the number of succussions. Instead of being 10, which was the standard for the centesimal, he adds 100. Because when you've got that big dilution factor, you've got a lot of diluent molecules to transform into the potency compared to the actual material that's being diluted. So there's a lot of capacity for that kinetic energy to make changes within the diluent, and that's why they're quite potent remedies. And they're always given in liquid form, which makes them very mild and gentle. And they're relatively low potencies, although for Hahnemann they were higher than 30, which is what he used. So they're fascinating.
You know, I get asked a lot. I'm sure you do as well. And generally, when you hear within circles of homeopathy, and especially with students as well, they do always ask that question: are LMs a higher potency than the centesimal scale, for example? Is a 1 LM higher than a 200C or a 1M? Is a 1 LM and a 1M actually? There's also a question. So
yeah.
Do with your wisdom, do clarify this.
If you go back to the way I work it out is this: a 1C is a 1 in 100 dilution. A 2C is a 1 in 10,000 dilution of the original. When you get to 3C, it's 1 part in a million. So by diluting in one step to 50,000, it's somewhere between 2 and 3. It's more than 10,000, but it's not a million. So if we say that each step of LM is somewhere between 2 and 3C, say 2.5C for the sake of argument, which we've got to do, and we start off with a 3C trituration to make the first LM1. So the LM1 is about 5.5C, and then if you extrapolate that right through to LM30, it's about 78C. Because you've got a big dilution factor, it doesn't mean that you're going to go straight up to the levels of 201M, where you're doing this repetitive thing many times, which will get much more of a relative dilution than the LMs will. But as I said earlier, for Hahnemann, these were high. He knew these were higher potencies than the 30 that he always used. He wasn't a high potency man. Some of his students had 200s, and I even heard that a 1M had been done during Harman's lifetime, but he wasn't interested. He thought that was enough. And I think he's right with the LM, particularly with the LMs. But there again, when you look at his remedy, what he had in his remedy cases when he died, he didn't have many LMs. He only had them up to LM12. He only had 30 or 40 remedies, I think. So he'd only started using them a couple of years before he died. And then there was that big gap between when the story of the 6th edition that was hidden for 80 years. Kent didn't know about the 6th edition. He didn't know about LM potencies. That's why he developed the centesimals and made machines to go to 10M and CM and above. He didn't know about the LMs. Nobody did until 1921. And then at 1921, homeopathy was at an all-time low because new medicines were coming. All of the homeopaths of America and the hospitals had gone. All the new drugs were being developed. The modern medicine was very popular. So even though Borika translated the 6th edition in 1922, I think it was, nobody used them until the 60s. Then India started using them, and there's a couple of pamphlets by Indian homeopaths. So I went through college. I went through working in a pharmacy, not knowing anything about LMs. And it wasn't until Helios started that I started to get asked for them. I thought, well, I better find out what these are all about. So I started reading paragraph 270 and beyond in the organ. It just blew me away. I thought, my goodness, what have we got here? And how is it that when you succuss the bottle, you don't add any in, you don't plus it, you add it, but the potency increases. When does that end? When does that become saturated? All those questions about potency started to open up for me with the LMs, as well as the practicality. People like to have a bottle, they shake it and they take a teaspoon dose. They know they like that once a day. And then you don't have to worry about choosing potency. You start with the LM1. You don't have to worry about repetition. You can do it as often or as infrequently as you like, as long as you just modify the potency before each dose. It overrides the dose of yesterday and stimulates the vital force to the maximum without aggravating.
It's absolute genius, isn't it?
Yeah, it
I mean,
is.
it really is, you know.
Yeah, his methodology is so wonderful. His chemistry knowledge and his ability as a chemist and the practical way he developed the potencies and the dilutions is amazing. Absolutely amazing.
You know what really is profound is someone who was so heavily persecuted and ridiculed and laughed at and mocked, and who had to move home so many times, you know, I think it's over 20, between 25 to 30 times or more maybe. And there were no means of transport, of course. I mean, to come up with what he did and what he left us, I mean, it's absolute. I mean, talk about commitment to your profession. I
Mm.
mean, how can you achieve something so fantastic, which is going to stand the test of time, which we all know, certainly, um, whilst going through everything else that life throws at you? And in fact, it wasn't even an issue. It wasn't his fault. People just didn't like it because here was homeopathy, and it was perhaps a bit too, I don't know, maybe too advanced. Maybe it was just not financially viable enough, you know.
Mm.
And he left us with something. I think about that a lot. You know, I think to
Mm.
go through a life which is full of hardships and then still come out a genius to leave humanity with something so incredible. I
Mm.
mean, you know, your example of the LMs and moving up the scales as you shake the bottle, you know, LM one, two, three, etc., etc. I mean, wow, this is over 200 years ago.
Yeah, and there
Yeah.
was there was definitely some intuitive understanding of the energetics of making remedy and potency. He's a bit like a musician. You know, all the great musicians went through terrible difficulties to create such beautiful,
Mm,
inspiring music, and some of the greats, it's the adversity that actually breaks them through to be original thinkers. And I mean, he had a good life at the end. He had his rewards at the end. He had Melanie. Their love was very, very beautiful, soul to soul love. At the end of his life, he was very famous in Paris, and he was quite well off, and he was living in the high society of Paris. So I think he had in later life he had his rewards for the hardship. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
I was going to ask you, with Helios, now something quite interesting is that the original place that you moved into is still the original place.
Well, we moved over the road in
Yeah,
1981.
literally though, but I mean, you
Yeah,
know,
we're
but
still
you
in the
have,
same road. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but you have another office, don't you, as well? Another pharmacy, should I say?
Yeah. One of the things, again, going back to the initial idea was to have a clinic. In the first place, we only had a bedroom upstairs, which was part of our living quarters. But over the road, we used to look out and see the place there, which had an upstairs. It had a separate entrance to an upstairs flat. And when we took that on in 1991, when we moved, we needed more space, it also had clinic rooms. So then we had everything then, and then we got the high potency machine, and that was it. We had everything we needed to fulfill our initial vision. So we've had a clinic going since 1991. So we get a lot of acute prescribing and counter prescribing within the pharmacy, and on the phones, huge amount of the work now in all the homeopathic pharmacies is VOICE, and that's increasing
Hmm.
since COVID and since the GPs are not accessible. And then we can help with self-limiting things like most pharmacists do, but then there's an opportunity for more chronic cases in the clinics and referring to homeopaths. So a lot of our work is that within the pharmacies. Yeah. And that's very satisfying. Most of the homeopaths who work with me, they get a lot of satisfaction from helping people. Yeah.
I know that from contacts, and I know anyway, Helios is really, really busy. I mean, how do you manage? How do you manage that? I mean, with the influx of calls and of course you mentioned the clinic and the preparation of there's the mail order side, which is absolutely huge. We were talking just before recording that nearly every single person I speak to, no matter where they are on this planet, always talk about the fact they have a Helios kit or they started off with a Helios kit. So, I
Mm.
mean, the reach is extraordinary, you know. you're talking about America and New Zealand and Australia and Canada and far off places, Indonesia, Bali. I mean, wow.
Yeah.
So, how do you manage that? I mean, it must be quite challenging at times, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, it has grown gradually. It didn't happen overnight. It's going over a long period of time. And actually, the kit project was a collaborative project with Mary Aspinwall, who helped design those kits. And yeah, it started very small. The breakthrough in a way, and what we had to make a big decision around 94, 95, because in order to commercialize a remedy, that is to make it into a more industrial form, for want of a better term, that can go into a health shop or go into a pharmacy or be marketed and resold, then it involves licensing and a manufacturing license. And that's a big step. Because then you're like a small pharmaceutical company, you have to have clean rooms, you have to have procedures, and you're governed by some very hefty rules and regulations. But we did that on a small scale and started that, and that's when we could start marketing the kits more widely through the licensing process. So that was one of the first things we licensed, as well as a small range of remedies. And we were the first to have them in little screw, the plastic ones like the French, where you turn the top and one pops out. So we started that in 94, and that's been a very, very slow process of getting licenses. But that's one of the reasons the kits did so well. And then just through word of mouth and through homeopaths teaching courses, around the kit, writing books around the kit. Mary and Wayne Aspinall in America did a fantastic job. They lived there and they got them on Amazon, and they have their own courses that they run, and they do great PR for us. So we haven't done it alone, but it has been a slow and gradual process, and it's a very time-consuming, labor-intensive process. So we have a lot of people, and we are bulging at the seams a little bit, but we're containing it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's again, I think it's so it's genius to come out with that kit, to be perfectly honest with you, because it's so useful and it's so handy. And specifically when we look at students and those who've just recently graduated, there's always this thing, oh my God, which remedies? And of course, over the years, you build up thousands. I've got thousands in the back myself, but you have to start somewhere. And it's so good to say, or to know that, hey, there's this is available, and look, it's got what you need initially. At least let's go through this and let's start, plus of course with alongside other things as well. But yeah, well, congratulations on that, because I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. Well, you're bringing me into another subject, and that is the evolution of remedies. And again, the part of the resurgence of homeopathy over the last 40 years has partly been to provings and new remedies. Hahnemann only had 110 remedies when he died. He didn't have a lot. And when I studied, and I think even now, most colleges will students will learn maybe 300-400 of the top polycrest. And Borica has got 600 or 700, I think, and some of those old books, they haven't got a lot. But now, in the repertories, there's over 1,000 entries of remedies that have rubrics or habituaria medica through proving and through theoretical proving material from, where you're using existing provings to develop insights into plants or minerals, for example. So there's so many remedies now for students to choose from, and so many remedies that we've developed. And I sometimes wonder, and being at the center of that growth, I sometimes wonder whether we've gone too far, whether we've got too many, and certainly some of the fringe things that we've got, have been used to ridicule us. Berlin Wall, for example, that very controversial, and those telemetric and energetic remedies. I actually love Sol and Lunar and magnetic pole and those ones. So I think we need to sort of consolidate, I think, on what we've got, and So new books are coming out with different kingdoms, new materia medica. There's a lot, but and the other thing is important to note that we've got maybe about 3,600 or so potentized substances in the pharmacy.
Hmm.
And certainly, I know my friends at Ainsworth and some of the other specialist pharmacists will have the same amount. But so many of those are isopathic. They're not homeopathic, or they're not used homeopathic. They're used isopathic. They don't have any materia medica. They don't have any proving. They don't have any rubrics associated with them. They're purely, this is what caused this. So a bit of it potentized is going to do something, because there's obviously some toxic overlap. And they have their place, these isopathic things. But yeah, a lot of the work is that. And I often say to students, what is the definition of a homeopathic remedy? Legally, it's something that's been succussed and diluted and prepared by a certain method.
Mm.
But actually, something isn't homeopathic until it's given according to that law of similars. And a mother tincture, a very crude dose, can be homeopathic if it's given in that way, just as potentized material can be suppressive in some cases. So it's how you use it really that makes it homeopathic. So I think if I always encourage students to be aware about what they're doing and where they're pitching the remedy, and it doesn't make anything right or wrong. It's just to be aware. Yeah.
I have a question for you, actually. Based on this and what you've said as well, do you think we may have too many remedies? Because I certainly, in my experience, I always seem to go back to the ones that I'm experienced with, or the ones I know. Of course, I'm very open-minded. I love to try new remedies, or certainly, research them or look into them. But do we have too much? Because are we really is everybody going to end up using all those remedies? Or, is this good for homeopathy as far as progress is concerned, or?
Well, I don't know the answer to these questions that I asked, but one is that I have asked over and over again to experienced homeopaths. Are your results so much better now than they were when you started? Now you've got all the radioactives, and now you've got all this and this and this. I don't know what the definitive answer is, but I don't think it's going to be exponentially better.
Mm.
And also, of course, there's not one remedy. And at best, we're trying to get the nearest one that we've got with, which is available now. The actual minimum may be something unproved, unknown. So we're always trying to get to as near as we can. And of course, homeopathy, the law of similars isn't just black and white. There are partial overlaps. So that's why so many remedies within the same framework or similar framework will do something. And to go further, arguably every remedy will do something, because they are drugs, they are poisons. They may not be material poisons, but they do create symptoms. And so, and improvings, most people, if they're receptive and prepared, will get symptoms in improving. So it shows that every remedy does something. So I think the results continue, and it's the results which are the test, really. But in terms of learning and what somebody will use within their ranges of home, they'll just have to develop their own canon of remedies. And people will always go to a certain degree with what they know. Whenever there's a seminar, and we know when there's a seminar and a certain remedy's been mentioned, because we get inundated with why is everybody ordering Dharma, somebody's done a lecture on it,
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, at least you know what seminars are being held.
Yes.
What remedies are current, or what's the breaking news as far as remedies. But what's your guide? Because for those who aren't aware, John Morgan also teaches internationally around the world. He's a lecturer as well. So what's your guidance to the students, and of course those listening in to this show as well, as far as starting off with remedies? Stick to the polycrest, or just get to know each remedy, or what's your thoughts there?
Well, if you're within a college structure, then obviously you'll be led through the main remedies, and most colleges will go through the polycrest. But if you're somebody at home and you just want to treat for the family, then by learning 30 or 40 remedies, those common aconite to silica remedies and all the ones in between that everybody knows, by knowing those really well, knowing the modalities, knowing what situations, you'll be able to cover so many things. And even though there could be another remedy which is a little bit more refined and more specific, you would get good results just with 30 or 40 remedies. And that's how I started, by learning and when discounter prescribing and just using those. But of course, there are so many, like all the no-sodes and the other big constitutional remedies, which are also so important, which for more chronic cases vital to know. And some of the new remedies are so characteristic in their pictures that they're very important. They're fitting more modern constitutions, and that's why we do need new remedies, is because people are evolving and changing, and aspirations and inner conflicts and inner disease and people's outlook on life is changing all the time. And so we do need new ones. We definitely do. Yeah.
And so I guess in essence, it's, of course, with the colleges, you've correctly mentioned that they are taught the polycrests. But I suppose as a homeopath, from a student to, maturing through the profession as such, or should I say service to humanity through homeopathy, you just add, don't you? It's a natural process, I suppose. You just add what appeals to you. Certainly, I came across a remedy recently and it just appealed, and I thought, okay, let me learn about this, let me see. And then subsequently I tried it, and amazing results. So it goes back to what you've said. Yes, I mean, it's good, it's progressive, it's needed, especially with complex diseases today. I mean, people come with layers, don't they? Everything is so masked. Chemicals, pesticides, and inhalant allergies, and issues with the colon, and different miasmatic layers as well, and it can be really challenging. So it is nice, isn't it, to have sort of a diverse range of remedies that are available.
Yeah, and all the provings that have been done there. Proving is a wonderful thing to do for a homeopath or a student to do. It's an incredibly healing process, and if anybody needs any proof that homeopathy and remedies do something, then do a proving, because to have the symptoms come within a group of people in a blinded situation is incredible. It's magical. And it's a very healing process. It's a very good developmental process. And a lot of the provings fall by the wayside and aren't used a lot, but some of them are used quite regularly. But I did a survey many years ago, and I think it's probably still true today, that about 75% of all the remedies that we provide is probably within 500 or 600 remedies. And then the rest are a smaller percentage. I think that's still the case today. And of course, arnica will always be the number one remedy.
Always, isn't it? Yeah.
Always, yes.
The flagship.
Yes.
For homeopathy, isn't it?
Hugely out there.
Yeah. I know that Helios is very involved with new provings, and certainly yourself, are very supportive of this. So what are the new remedies, or what has sort of transpired over the last year as far as new provings are concerned? But actually, before you answer that, because I'll forget that I'm going to ask you this, have you yourself personally been involved with a proving?
Many times, yeah. I've done many provings and over the years, and many different sorts of provings, from trituration provings, where you spend a weekend grinding a remedy and get the symptoms from that without taking it, which is quite an interesting process.
Wow.
To full Hahnemannian provings. I was one of the plutonium provings, I remember, with Jeremy's group, which was quite profound. To meditation provings, where you do it in a short time, where you just go into a very receptive state and either hold or take the remedy, within a group, and you get an initial insight into what the remedy can create. And dream provings, where you put it under the pillow and see what the dreams come there. So yeah, I've done a lot over the years. I haven't done any recently, but yeah, I've done a lot. And then
you have to, John, do you have to is there a remedy to take before doing a proving so that your body can be attuned to whatever it is you're going to prove? Or does it
no,
vary?
we didn't do it with using remedies, but the group that I was in with the meditation provings, we did prepare. We didn't take any remedies for several months. We did work on being able to get into a receptive state. In terms of the conventional Hahnemannian provings, you just need to be in a pretty good, fit, healthy state, and also know what your symptoms are from the start, which your supervisor usually helps with by taking your case at the beginning. So yeah, but there's not really the remedy you want to take before approving. You want to be free from any influence of remedies if possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, yep, the second thing was to do with the provings and the new remedies. So what have you been involved with recently, or remedies that come to your mind which have recently been proven?
Yeah. Well, every year I go down to the School of Homeopathy and help the students there. They do a proving every year. So it's interesting to see the remedies they have there. I think the last one has now been unblinded, so I can mention it. They did a fungus, a honey fungus, which was interesting. And then they did one with a termite.
That was mentioned on the show
a
couple of weeks ago. It wasn't a pleasant experience, I think, just thinking about that.
Yeah. I don't get so much involved in the proving bit, but I get them started and we make the remedy together. That's always fun. There are less provings than there were now, but yeah, but I mean, I've always got to be grateful to Jeremy Sherb, who I met as a student, and he started the first wave of provings with the Scorpion, I think in '84, and then I was involved in most of his proving remedies over the years, from hydrogen and adamas and some of the others, and all the neons and the argons and the inert gases. So it's been great working with him, and that also has been very helpful to actually put Helios on the map internationally, because that's another reason why I've supported provings, is because a lot comes back with that, because people want to get the remedy from where it was made, which is understandable. From the original process that the proving was on it. And a lot of our work in pharmacy is mirroring and mimicking the original provings. So that's why we still use calf from the oyster shell, because that's what it was used in the beginning.
It's interesting. Jan Scholten, I was recording a show with him, and he said something which I really liked. He said, it's a remedy, yes, and it's got this frequency or vibrational energy pattern, whatever you can call it. He said, but it's just information. It's just like when we look at IT and we look at data packets. It's data. It's basically information, bite-sized information, and it's just how much information does a person need as far as thinking of potencies are concerned. Less information, a bit more, a bit deeper. It's interesting, isn't it? How people have their different perspectives and what they think about, potencies as well. And yeah, I just thought I'd share that. I just found that fascinating.
Yeah. Well, this is also one of the things that keeps me and others going, is that there still is this mystery about what the potency actually is and how it actually interacts. And I'm, again, going back to the alchemy model, I'm always fascinated with the as above, so below. We see the energetic part of it. We see that's mainly how we work with choosing potency and matching up the archetype with the similar with the patient. But what is it that's still there physically that is reflecting that? because energy needs, even if it's an energy, it has a physical representation. And I'm quite interested in the new nanoparticle theories about how those crystals that are based on with silica seeding to create nanoparticles which represent the original substance. And it may be that the remedies still have a physical receptor site action because drugs work by a lock and key, a receptor site thing. Everyone knows about beta adrenaline drugs that block the adrenaline receptor. It puts a key in a lock which doesn't create a flight and fight, but it stops adrenaline getting in. And likewise, in contrast, other drugs, the receptor site stimulate things. So this is how the whole biochemistry works and how drugs work. So it may be that remedies also have some trigger that is a physical one as well as the information one. And because all that kinetic energy that's gone into it, that's gone somewhere. So there's some force, there's some vital principle in there which is associated with it that also will stimulate.
Do you think we're getting any closer to that?
Well, through the nanoparticles, yes, but not through what it does on the inner and how it connects with the inner part. I mean, when you go into the economy of the individual, when you get to the more spiritualized parts, the deep mind and the deep emotions, and how the remedy actually connects with that or draws that out, it's that mechanism. The law of similars is there.
What your preferences are, and I know it's not easy to answer what I'm going to say, but generally, I mean, do you use more LMs? Do you use more centesimal, or does it really vary, just like case to case?
I'm not practicing a lot at the moment, but I still do have a part-time practice. When I was practicing more, I had a phase of using all liquid remedies all the time, either LMs or centesimals, because I just like the shake and the teaspoon from the bottle. And of course, we have all the facilities to do that. So I like liquid remedies in liquid form, particularly big bottles, because you get a greater development of the potency. But I think I choose what's appropriate. I mean, with a clear constitutional case, I'll still go for high potencies in frequent single dose once a week or whenever's necessary. I vary it. I use LMs generally when there's a high degree of sensitivity, when I think they're going to be easily aggravated. But there's not really any rationale to that. I mean, a 30C in a liquid could maybe do the same. Remedies in liquid form are definitely weaker until you start succussing them, milder and gentler. And that's what the challenge of the LM philosophy is, to tune into the sensitivity of the patient and how easily aggravated they are. So we choose the stock bottle accordingly in the dosage so that they don't aggravate. And I've had some very, very extreme sensitive cases that have even, say, used olfaction of the glass of the LM, because the dose they need is so small.
It's
varied.
I use LMs a lot for emotional instability or treating, mental health conditions, and I personally, I mean, my experience is I find them fascinating. I mean, they're so the results are so amazing.
Yeah,
and people they don't even know what happens. You see them 1 week, you have a follow-up, and it's like, so different. And when you have that conversation with them and you say, wow, this is what's changed, and they say, yeah, it's changed. We can't believe this. I mean, what is this? And so, yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, I love LMs, of course, and every other remedy as well, every other potency rather, or potency scale.
a lot of more chronic cases, they need repetition. They definitely need repetition. So again, modifying the dose each time means there's no risk of creating improving or them not progressing because you're staying on the same potency.
Yeah.
And you can do it on a small scale, just with a 10 ml bottle. It doesn't have to be a big bottle. Yeah.
John, we are at the end of today's show. It's been an absolute honor, honestly. I've loved every minute. I have been on your back for so long, and it's been certainly worth it. I'm going to have such a good night's sleep tonight.
Okay.
Thank you so very much for coming on the show, giving us sharing your wisdom, your insights, experiences, and talking about, of course, Helios Pharmacy, which is known around the world now as well. Thank you so much indeed.
Well, thank you very much as well for inviting me.
I do hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of the Homeopathy Health Show. Please do support the show by clicking follow on my socials. Remember, the more exposure the podcast receives, the better for homeopathy around the world. You can find me on Instagram by searching for @like_treatslike, and on both Facebook and TikTok by searching for @like_treatslike. So let's promote the voice of homeopathy on radio and podcast around the world together. Don't forget to visit me online at www.liketreatslike.co.uk and click on the radio and podcast tab. Here you'll be able to see all the guests that have joined me on the show so far. And of course, you can stream on demand the latest episode to your mobile, tablet or PC. Until next time, stay safe and take care.